Good morning, Geauga County, Lake County, northeastern Ohio. You are listening to the voice of Geauga, where every weekday morning, Monday through Friday, 7
including
a.m.,
Mondays.
including Monday, 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. You'll be listening to the voice of Geauga and WINT Radio, 101.5 and 1330 a.m. out of Lake County, and the footprint is into Geauga County, Lake County, uh, part of Cuyahoga County, and a little bit of Ashtabula County. But of course, you can stream us from any place in the world, and I proved that. I'm going to take a tax deduction for traveling to Puerto Rico and Sedona just to prove that I could get and stream Voice of Geauga from any place in the world. And in fact, it works. And most people didn't even know that I was on the road testing for the Voice of Geauga, the things that I do for the Voice of Geauga. And so I've got with me this morning Jonathan Broadbent, and we were
Good morning,
bantering
all.
around various ideas for the program this morning, and one of which was, do people care or listen to what's going on in the political sphere? In other words, you get information. For example, that somebody might have violated the Sunshine Law. There is a suggestion that two of our commissioners might have done that. Does that make a difference to our electorate? That was one idea. The other
Well,
idea is,
Skip, before you move on to the other idea, remember before the show, I made the comment people have to know and understand it in order to care. And that's where normally our media is supposed to come in. So most people have no idea about the allegation of violations of Sunshine Law and what that even means. So good journalism would put that together, and there might even be TV news media coverage of it. But right now we have crickets. So most people on topics like that, Skip, are unaware. And I think that's by design.
well, you would think that there would be a big uh, share on a reveal on that on the part of some of our newspapers, because that's significant when we've got two
Ah,
elected officials who potentially violated the law, potentially, allegedly. We'll see where that goes in court, because it looks like maybe they did. I believe they did. Then does that going to make a difference to the electorate when we have a auditor who attempted to go after Metzenbaum, a public entity, the property is owned by the county commissioners, to charge property tax on a public entity, which would have to pay the property tax via public dollars because they only make money coming out of their out of the levies and stuff they collect. Yeah, they have some businesses that rent space from them to help offset the some of their overhead and costs. But outside of that, they're making money primarily in the public sector. So we have to pay tax with a tax. That doesn't even make any sense. And the state auditor said, no, that's not going to work. Stop it. Um, Geauga County auditor, and so I have a letter where our auditor got smacked. Does that make any difference to the electorate? Do they just look the other way and say, "Well, that's okay that I like this guy, so it's okay for him to break the rules. It's okay because we like the people in our tribe, so it's okay to violate the rules." So do we care about that? And that kind of actually ties in a little bit to the other topic that we had, which was capitalism, because we think we live in a capitalist society and free enterprise and all that kind of stuff. And to some extent, we do. But unfortunately, we have so much socialism, Marxism being pushed, and I use our healthcare as a perfect example of that, that we don't really have a capitalist society. When you have public private partnerships, and everybody's enamored by this word, public private partnerships, you don't have a free economic society. You don't have a true capitalist free enterprise because there's unfair competition. The government put their thumb on the scale and picked a winner. And so that's the public private partnership. Do people care that we're actually distorting? And so you have the Marxist socialist Democrats stand up, and that's, I'm not referring to the old school Democrats like my father and many others that I knew. I'm not talking about old school Democrats. I'm talking about the left wing wacko Marxist socialist, like the three people running for our congressional seat against Dave Joyce or whoever wins the primary coming up, we have three Democrats, and they're Marxists, they're socialists, and I listened to them talk in the League of Women Voters the other night, and it stuns me that in this country we have people that are promoting that openly, and we don't get this huge pushback from our society. And to your point, Jonathan, a lot of that is because our society has not been educated. They don't understand. And my unfortunate situation is, first of all, I took an oath in the military that I would fight communism when I went into the military. They don't do that oath anymore. And I traveled the world and got a chance to see communism firsthand, and saw some of its impacts. And it's very, very scary and very, very bad. Marxism, socialism around the world are destroying countries. Socialist healthcare in Canada, you can't get good healthcare. All the Canadians come to the United States to get good healthcare. So I don't understand this thinking where people are so ignorant about some of the facts, and yet they make decisions to support that stuff. And so I guess let's go with that topic, the capitalist one. We can talk about the other one
Yeah,
maybe tomorrow.
let's drill down a little bit, Skip, on the information that you were just sharing and whether or not people care. So you mentioned something that's specific, and you certainly care about. You're involved with pushing back against our county commissioners under the allegation that they have violated a law. You violated sunshine law. Let's use that as a starting point. You're mentioning something that means something to you. And let's be fair about where we are right now. This is a Monday morning. People are waking up at 7:11 a.m. You very quickly highlighted something that means a lot to you. But your brief description of that, I I am sorry, I mean no offense by this, Skip, but it's really not going to land on the audience. It's not going to land, it's not going to be meaningful because many people don't know what the sunshine laws are. They don't know what you're talking about. They don't know what the circumstances are. And they can't be led to or expected to care about that because they've not been informed. So that goes back to my original statement. If we had a productive, successful, and caring media locally, and that means local papers, there would probably be a series of articles. Hey, everybody in Geauga County, there are these important laws that create transparency in government called sunshine laws. Let's cover that so that you understand why sunshine laws exist. And if somebody violates them or is alleged to violate them, what kind of recourse do we have as a public? And then they would introduce Skip Claypool. Skip Claypool is a caring citizen who believes that people have violated that law. It brings people up to speed and informs them. And I think if you do that, then you end up with a caring citizenry. But it's not enough for, I mean, let's just ballpark. Let's estimate. How many people know in Geauga County that there is an alleged sunshine law violation against our commissioners? 100?
Yeah,
200?
it's the people that read the Maple Leaf, if people read the Maple Leaf, or they've read the Voice of Geauga and another issues on the cusp of coming out. So,
So
and
hopefully that information gets out, and then ultimately it's reasonable once the information is successfully presented to the public. Then it's fair to say, hey, public, what's the deal? Do you care or do you not care? That that frustrating first step is almost non-existent. Or I shouldn't call it the frustrating first step. That first step is frustratingly almost non-existent. We have very little actual news coverage. And that goes back to the comment I've been making for a couple of months now about ice cream cones. Remember all those images of Joe Biden wandering around like this friendly, doddering old man? He's eating ice cream cones, and you would look at that, and most people would think, "Oh, look at that. What harm could come from this old guy eating ice cream cones?" Well, locally we have all these flowing pictures of people eating pancakes and pouring maple syrup and cutting ribbons. And they look like friendly, maybe doddering-ish. Maybe they just smile for the camera and make people feel good briefly while they read some article about some ribbon cutting. And look, this new facility, it could have cost $800 million, but gosh, we only spent $600 million on this new glamour building for fill in the blank. Then people just move on and go on with their lives. And things like the allegations you brought against our county commissioners and alleged violations of the Sunshine Law are either nowhere to be seen, they're swept under the rug, or they're very poorly covered. So, as a fundamental first step, people need to know that the issue exists in order to begin maybe caring about it. That gets into media, and you bring up a really good example, Voice of Geauga in that paper. You say that's coming out soon, huh?
Yes, we're working hard to get that produced and get it
Awesome.
into work. So
Good, good. Well, that's one avenue, and it's a group of caring people led by you. Thank you again for tackling that and taking it on, Skip. That's pushing back and trying to get real news out. We're coming up on a break. We've got about 30 seconds. I want to introduce a few things. I want to make sure that everybody out there knows to find us on Rumble, Facebook, or YouTube. Don't forget to click that like button and share it. You can join the conversation at any time at 440-946-9468. You're listening to Voice of Geauga on WINT Radio. We'll be back with more on the other side of the break.
Mics are off. Mics are off.
All righty. We've got a good question from Gardens of CH. Do we know if Geauga commissioners have signed NDAs for any contracts? The Perry Data Center mess is an example. You know anything about our commissioners signing NDAs?
No, particularly with the peri-nuclear power plant. I mean, non-disclosure agreement, is that what we're talking about, where they can't disclose stuff?
Yep,
Generally, no, because in the public sector, everything is public. And so
should
they
be.
wouldn't sign a non-disclosure agreement with Perry because everything that they do, if they did, it would kind of violate the whole transparency issue, sunshine law, all that kind of stuff that they're obligated to under state law. And so I'm not familiar with any NDAs, non-disclosure. Individual commissioners might sign an NDA to get information. So if somebody was going to disclose, some proprietary information, then there may be some non-disclosure agreements, but it wouldn't be with the commissioner's office. It would be individuals who read stuff to make a decision, and then whatever progresses would be in the public, hopefully public view, unlike the situation I talked about with the Sunshine Law violation. And so,
30 seconds.
You would think that everything should happen in public light, but I think the example listed there, I think that's a current issue in Lake County. I think the commissioners signed an NDA. I don't know the details. I know of it vaguely, but I don't
10
think.
seconds. 10 seconds.
Welcome back to Voice of Geauga with Skip Claypool, myself, Jonathan Broadbent, and today we're talking about Marxist ideals, and we are covering also news and information, and who cares? Who is it that actually cares about our local economy, our society, government officials, breaking the law? Are there people out there that care about these things? Before we continue, I'm going to pause to give a tip of the hat and a big thank you to our supporting sponsors. That's the Chardon VFW, Middlefield VFW, and the Chardon and Newberry American Legion, and Red EFT. Contact Red EFT at 440-850-4968 for your tree cutting and bush and tree maintenance. They're arborists, not just the people that come and cut your tree. They're the people that will come out and assess the health of your bushes and trees and give you a pruned and healthier landscape. Red EFT, 440-850-4968. I have a suggestion for you, especially if you have children or grandchildren. Visit a website called victimsofcommunism.org. That's victimsofcommunism.org. We hear numbers thrown around like 110 million people who've lost their lives under pursuing social communism, Marxism, whatever you want to call it. It all sort of bundles up into virtually identical systems of government that terrorize the people. And Victims of Communism is a website that does a good job of explaining all about it and share that with kids so they can make better decisions. But before we went to break, we were talking about how people become informed. Excuse me. First, people have to understand what's happening around them in order to care about what's happening around them. And sort of connected to that, I'm going to toggle over to Rumble, where we've got a good question from Gardens of CH. Do we know if Geauga commissioners have signed NDAs, that stands for non-disclosure agreement, for any contracts? The Perry Data Center, which is in Lake County, that mess is an example. So Skip and I started talking about that. We're not aware of any uh, non-disclosure agreements that have been signed by our commissioners. But as a starting point, Skip made an excellent point, which is everything that our commissioners do should be done in broad daylight for all of us to see. And connected to some of the decisions recently made by Carolyn Brakey and Jim Dvorak, we should have the right and opportunity to go and speak on it because they are our hired, paid representatives. If they're not representing us and our interests, then whose interests are they representing? Right, Skip?
Yeah, I mean that's always a question, right? So when you have elected officials and you have lobbyists and you have people donating money to people's campaigns, particularly outside of, and I'll use Geauga County as an example, if you have elected officials who donate money to an elected official and they're from outside of our county, that raises questions. I'm not making an allegation. I'm just saying it certainly raises questions. Who do you serve? I will tell you that Ross Larry doesn't take a nickel when he runs his campaigns. He's obligated to nobody. And so, and when I ran my last campaign, I had one person donate, a friend. But outside of that, I didn't take any money to run my campaigns. I did it totally out of pocket for the very reason we're talking about, and that is you're obligated. And if I did in prior campaigns, I took money from people in Geauga County because there were citizens who supported me, and I truly would represent their interest because I made promises to them, and I would fulfill the promises that I made. Of course, they're pretty easy to fulfill. To be straightforward, honest, work hard, do all that kind of stuff, but and not to give away our sovereignty, like giving away our health department to Lake County, and on a bogus, we're going to say $500,000 claim, which I would love to get into a debate over because it's not hard to take apart. But you know, who do you really serve when you're taking money from people? And so I'm not familiar with this supposed Perry nuclear plant controversy and why an NDA would be required. I see we've got some comments that State Representative um, Byrd and
Yeah,
Brian
Adam
Stewart
Byrd from New Richmond and
introduced
Brian Stewart from Asheville.
legislation prohibiting certain local elected officials from entering into a non-disclosure agreement. Again, that's really contrary. It's in conflict with our sunshine laws if you sign an NDA, because if you
Yep.
can't share information in the public, then you can't conduct your business in the public. Now, there are certain situations if you have a legal situation and you have a legal an attorney-client privilege, or if you're buying property and you don't want to disclose the negotiation because that puts the county or township or whoever into a bad negotiating position. But the ultimate deal is going to be made in the public. So you can talk about a few things behind closed doors in what they call executive session, but ultimately any decision has to be made in the public setting. And so an NDA would kind of violate that
Yeah.
whole premise. And so I'd like to know more. I don't know too much about the situation. I'd like to know more about it. It doesn't smell right to me. So,
Well, Sharon CG goes on to say that the bill prohibits village mayors, county commissioners, township trustees, and members of a village council from knowingly entering into a non-disclosure agreement connected to their official duties. It seems to me like that's just common sense. I can't imagine circumstances, and again, I don't know enough about the alleged circumstances or alleged environment that is happening in Lake County related to the Perry nuclear power plant. I know that there's an issue, but I just don't know the details of it. But if that's the case, then absolutely, Skip's spot on. That should not be allowed. That should not ever happen. There
well,
should not be a circumstance under which people are making decisions and hiding the logic behind those decisions behind a non-disclosure agreement.
this is, I'm seeing some comments, and I'm not going to share the names of the people. Wickliffe City Council said had an NDA with Lubrizol to add onto their facility. They gave them a 75% CRA credit. That's a credit, a tax credit for Community Investment Act. The Lake County Commissioners were aware of this NDA. Again, I think that personally, I think that sets up Wickliffe for a lawsuit because an NDA is in direct conflict with the Ohio law for doing business in a transparent way, and so any deal discussed or negotiated with any company would, in my view, have to be discussed in an open public setting. And I wouldn't be willing not to. I mean, I'm not going to hide stuff from the citizens. The citizens need to know it's their money. People who sit in the city council or a mayor or county commissioner or township trustee serve the public, and any decisions being made should be made in the public. And that's the issue that I had recently with the two of our commissioners in Nowaka. Some decisions were not being made in the public, and so that's my take on that. And it's not something I would ever personally. I can't consider any situation where I would violate that because that's your obligation when you run for public office. You agree to the rules you're going to play by, and those rules say you provide public documents if requested. That's the public records request. You conduct all of your business in an open public meeting, openly, and hopefully you give people the opportunity to ask questions. And there is legislation, and we should support that legislation that requires a public entity to take questions and answer questions publicly. Anyway,
Yeah.
but
Well,
it comes
ultimately,
back to, let's say if people know, they know a situation, whatever the situation happens to be. And so, should it make a difference to them? Let's say, hypothetically, if the alleged violation occurs, and too often I see the public who are supporting somebody in their tribe, they're supporting a particular candidate, they're willing to overlook a violation of the law. Look at what happened with President Biden. I mean, everybody knew he was mentally incompetent. You had to be dumb as a box of rocks to watch him on TV and have a little, Easter bunny directing him and, shaking hands with invisible people and all the goofy, stupid things that he did. And yet people would look the other way because they were in his tribe. I don't understand that thinking personally, and I'd love to have somebody call in if you think that that's okay to look the other way. 440-946-9468. But if you know of a public entity that's violating the law, that's not doing things properly, should we not care about that and in some way hold them accountable or make a correction? I mean, I'm very confused if we're not willing to do that. What do we think?
yeah, so there are some really great comments showing up in Rumble. One is that there's a disconnect between citizens and Geauga commissioners. Commissioner meetings, rubber stamp spending plans. Then we react and object after the fact. We have no input, therefore eroding trust. I think that is a very legitimate concern. We must insist that we, the people, have viable avenues of discussion and input on these spending plans. If we get back to the place where we, the people, have some input and there's oversight and there's daylight on things like our countywide spending plan, I'm pretty sure we wouldn't get to the point where we have significantly increased revenues, money coming in, but our spending is even higher than the increased revenue. We are spending the plan for the budget for 2026. We went into 2026 with a plan to spend so much money that we're outpacing, that we are burning through what little bit of cushion we might have. Those are the kinds of things that happen only when you get a couple of people together that have what they think are good ideas, and they're going to spend their way into prosperity for Geauga County, which, by the way, is a little side note, never ever happens. You can never spend your way into prosperity. And when we, the people, have access to that information and can comment and create transparency, and again, getting back to, oh, I
Time's
see
up.
we're up at a break. We'll be more on the other side of the break.
Mics are off. Mics are off.
Well, you can tell it's a Monday morning, and I'm not sharp enough and fully aware enough to have my eyes on that countdown timer. I almost missed it.
For the people that are listening to the station, I have one more restaurant slash. It's a restaurant in Bainbridge that wants to do a live radio, and they said they would open up early and then allow us to promote it. That's the diner down at Bainbridge. And so I ran into them last night when my wife and I went out to dinner. So once we get the paper out this week, hopefully it'll go out, and that'll free up some time. I'm gonna go run a test at Rise and Dine, and then we'll start advertising so we can get people there. So it's not going to be just a pop up kind of a radio thing, but we'll run some tests, make sure that the bandwidth is going to be work and all that kind of stuff, and then we'll do a live on site, have a conversation with the electorate in a restaurant.
Nice. Yeah, I know for Ohio Political News, Joe Miller ended up buying some really, I know a little bit about it, but he bought some very sophisticated software and hardware and all that stuff to be able to go and live stream. So when you see Ohio Political News at places like Columbus and Brian Massey traveling around covering events like our commissioners meeting a few weeks ago, or a month or so ago, that is based on putting some things together in a good way. So let's wish Skip Claypool some luck and good success with the hardware and software test from Rise and Dine. And then hopefully we can start going out and doing on the spot Voice of Geauga broadcasts from places all over the county.
And by the way, for the folks that are listening, this radio or this program needs your help because funding wise, when we come up toward the end of the month, we're going to be losing a huge sponsor. And this program costs us about $130 a show. And so it's hard with the two sponsors we have. They provide some money to us, but they don't fund it. They don't cover the entire cost. We have an angel investor who's helping us to put this program on. But shortly, we're going to be leaning more on our listeners to carry that load if the program is going to continue. Now, we could always continue without the radio station, but I'd like to continue on the radio station. So,
well, yeah, we need to find more advertisers, and just think about the value that Voice of Geauga brings. The fact that we are hitting so many households between the podcast, the radio broadcast, and the newspaper. The newspaper hits north of 43,000 mailboxes. So there are great advertising opportunities through Voice of Geauga to get the word out. There really isn't anything to compete. There's nothing that will compare to the reach and the effectiveness of Voice of Geauga. We hit a lot of homes and a lot of ears and a lot of eyes for not very much money. So if you know of a local business, maybe interested in advertising Voice of Geauga, send them our way. Send them to voiceofgeauga.com. And you can also email voiceofgeauga@gmail.com to get more information. There's a rate sheet.
30 seconds, 30
It's
seconds.
a spectacular deal that will help just about any local business to grow and flourish. And of course, it helps us, helps to keep Voice of Geauga on the air. It helps support great episodes like this one, where we delve into and talk about the important subjects that matter to you, our fellow
10
Geauga
seconds.
citizens.
10 seconds.
Welcome back to Voice of Geauga with Skip Claypool and myself, Jonathan Broadbent. Today we're talking about sunshine laws and whether or not people care. Where do people get their news and information? And is it fair to say that our local news and information is lackluster? It's not doing a good job of getting timely, accurate information out to people for us to respond and act upon. Well, Skip brought up something that is really important, and it factors in here, and that is executive session. That's a term not everybody's familiar with, so let's pause and define that. If you have a public meeting, let's use a school board as an example. You'd like to assume that pretty much everything that school board is doing and the decisions that they're making that impact the children in your community is done in broad daylight. There's a reason that there's a big theater set up with seating, and oftentimes there are cameras and they may broadcast the meeting on YouTube. The reason for that is that the taxpayers, the citizens, the parents and grandparents in that community can tune in and see what decisions are being made. And with rare exception, that's done. And it's out in broad daylight. However, in many meetings, you'll hear the board announce that they're going to go into executive session. That means they're going to take some of the decisions and some of the discussion that they're having private into a private room with no listening audience, no public, no cameras, no nothing. Very secret, private discussion. There is a time and place for that. However, I have found through my years of watching boards and how they operate, there are many boards that are willing to abuse that system. They're willing to go into private executive session and discuss things that should be discussed in public. That's similar to the conversation we had earlier about non-disclosure agreements. If there's something that's taking place in secret that impacts taxpayers, that is, generally speaking, a big no-no. As I said, there are some exceptions. Skip mentioned one, and that's a real estate transaction. Let's say that you're bidding on and trying to buy some property somewhere because you want to build a new building. Well, of course, you don't want to go out publicly and tell everybody, hey, we're looking at the property at 123 Main Street, whatever. By the way, that's just a hypothetical to illustrate my point. You wouldn't want to say that publicly because then other people could go in and bid it up and respond, etc. So you have to conduct that and similar things in private, but that's very, very limited, the number of things that should take place in executive session. The reason for all of this is so that people like Skip, and you've seen him, he's gone into those planning commission meetings. He's been man on the street. He's driving into those meetings and then tells us after the fact about what he's seen there. And the reason you can go on YouTube right now and watch any of our recent commissioners' meetings is so that we, the people, can delve into and see what's being done. But let's face it, not everybody has the time for that. That's where news media should come in and do an adequate job of turning it into a journalistic style of reading to give us a synopsis for people who are busy. That's where Voice of Geauga comes in. And unfortunately, we have some other local papers that, in my book, they fall well short of my expectations for covering those important topics. Right, Skip?
Yeah, there's 6 specific reasons, only 6 reasons you can go into executive session. And when you go into executive session, if you happen to be attending a public meeting, the public entity, county commissioners, trustees, whoever, library board, ADP board, whoever it is, has to be very specific on why they're going into executive session. So you can go into it for personnel matters, if you're going to discipline somebody, dismiss somebody, hire somebody, promote somebody, that's a personnel matter. A property transaction, a pending or imminent legal situation. So you can't just talk to your attorney. There has to actually be a pending or imminent court action. Oftentimes that's kind of fudged a little bit and wrongly. Collective bargaining, if you're negotiating a union contract, or if you're required by some federal state law to have discussions in a confidential way, or if you're discussing security arrangements for your public entity. Those are the only 6 reasons you can go into executive session. And by the way, all the decisions made through the discussion have to be made in a public setting. So you could discuss personnel matters, but if you're going to fire somebody, you have to come out into a public session and say, we're removing or releasing or firing or whatever an individual. All of that has to be discussed in a public setting. And there is nothing confidential that is said in the executive session that a public official can't come out and say. So there's no legal harm done to somebody. Even a an attorney-client privilege situation, it would be foolish for you to share something possibly that was you talked to your attorney about, and you put the board at risk. But there's nothing illegal about somebody coming out of an executive session and sharing with the public what was said. And if any notes are taken or materials handed out in an executive session, although the public wouldn't know about that, that is public information and people can request it. So there's all these rules that are associated with executive sessions and doing business. But again, back to my primary question. Let's say hypothetically that we know there's a violation. Should the public care? If I'm supporting a particular candidate and now I find out that that candidate has violated the law or done something improper, should I care? Should I is it okay to continue to support that person? And knowing if I know that they are a person of low integrity and willing to violate the law and so on and so forth, knowing that if they get elected, they probably will continue that behavior. I would love to hear from somebody out there, the listening audience. You can call us 440-946-9468. How do you justify supporting somebody who knowingly and willingly violates the law? How do you rationalize that in your brain? I have a hard time with that. And maybe it's me. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But I'd love to hear somebody tell me how they rationalize cocaine in the White House and then the Secret Service not being able to tell us who it is. Do you think the Secret Service doesn't know who had cocaine in the White House, Jonathan? I
No,
think
they
they
know. We
did.
all know.
I think that it just didn't come out, and people, acted like the CNN and MS Now and all these other organizations. Well, it's not a big deal. No, it's a big deal. How is it that a bunch of Marines got killed on the leaving Afghanistan, and that's not a big deal? I don't get that.
You
So
know,
I
there's a
mean,
connected piece there that concerns me, and that is we use the term rhino. In Ohio, I started something called Ohio Rhino Hunters, and that I've run that on social media. By the way, that's a hint to our listening audience. I'd love to have more boots on the ground, more people chipping in to make Ohio Rhino Hunters work and get the news and information out about the people within the Republican Party who maybe really shouldn't be there. But I've brought this question up recently. Is there a line that is too far for the Republicans in Geauga County or Ohio or the United States? If somebody enters office under the banner of the Republican Party, according to the website and the platform and published marketing content, Republican actually stands for something. But what if they get into office and behave exactly the same way as a far left, ultra liberal, progressive Democrat? If that happens, then we can't continue to claim that we have a two-party system, a two-party political system. What we have at that point is what's now referred to as a uniparty. So I've brought the question up many times recently. What do we do with those people who are in office and have an R next to their name? There are people, and it's frustrating, but they exist, who are very vocal within the Republican Party who say that doesn't matter, who say that they have to be protected no matter what they do. And I've asked the question. So, and this is a hypothetical, but what if What if a couple of our county commissioners here in Geauga County, again, this is just a hypothetical, but what if they invited Nancy Pelosi, AOC, and Bernie Sanders in for a day of county planning and worked up a plan and sketched it all out and then published that and said, hey, Geauga County, here's where we should go. Here's where we're headed next. That is beyond alarm bell. But it is very frustrating to me and mystifying that there are people that would say, well, that's no big deal. They're cool. I like that person. There are literally, I do believe that there are people within the Republican Party who would shrug even that off and just say, well, hey, they probably mean well. But look, they're Republicans. No, in my book, they absolutely are not. Those are, it's called party rating. Those are Democrats with Democrat far left liberal agenda who are pushing it under the banner of Republican. That too is a lie and disinformation. And that is something, going to Skip's point and the reason for today's episode. Do people care? Do
You know,
enough
we,
people
we, we
care?
have things going on in our county and people look the other way. You know, there was a day Richard Nixon resigned from office. I remember it well. I was young, but I paid attention to the news even back then, and even Republicans. Now, what he did doesn't even rise to the level of some of the nonsense going on today.
Yep,
But he resigned from office, was embarrassed, and the Republicans were embarrassed to have him, and because that was the standard. If you violated the law, look at what happened with Swalwell here recently. Everybody knew what a pervert this guy was, and they looked the other way. Nancy Pelosi and
allegedly,
everybody. What's that? Yeah, well,
allegedly.
alleged pervert. Okay. I think it'll be proven. But in any case, you're right. He's a alleged pervert. But he did sleep with a Chinese spy, and he was allowed to do that. That's not an allegation. That's a fact. And so I just don't. I'm Jonathan. I need somebody to help me to think or to think through this. And I know people they're out there thinking, oh, but Trump, he's a pedophile. Come on, are you serious? Let's get real.
There are people that got sued and he won in court for using that smear after the fact. Because the people that originally made that smear, they backpedaled and they retracted and they said, inappropriate behavior, they toned it down. But meanwhile, many in the public have run with it. We're coming up on a break and a few things. Remember, you can join us on social media. Don't forget to click that like button, share it around with others, and get the information out about Voice of Geauga. Rumble, Facebook, YouTube, and you can call in 440-946-9468. We'll come back with more on the other side of the break.
I'm gonna tell you a story. I'm gonna tell you about my town.
Mics are off. Mics are off.
So when we come
There's
back, I'll do the promo on the poll workers for Geauga County,
okay.
so that we can help with that.
Yeah.
And Gardens is absolutely right. Republicans are is bad. I'm getting so fed up with the Uniparty and what they're willing to do. Why have we not passed the SAVE Act? Everybody who's listening to this program, whether you're on Facebook, YouTube, or Rumble, we have the most active group. I want to say, I don't know how large the other two groups are, but we have the most active group on Rumble. Everybody should be picking up the phone and calling Houston and Bernie Marino right now. I think they're both in support of the SAVE Act, but we ought to be asking the question, what the heck is going on? That should be a done deal at this point in time. And we have the Republicans who are not pushing for that. I'm so disappointed in the Republicans. They failed us on Obamacare. We had an opportunity in the first Trump administration to eliminate Obamacare, to reverse all of the nonsense that was done by Obama, and we didn't. It was a failure on the part of our Republican leadership, and it's so disappointing.
I want to mention something. I forget who it was. Somebody was commenting on
30 seconds, and you have a phone call on line 1 from Bill Howard in South Russell Village.
All right.
I just used first name.
his address. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
10 seconds, 10 seconds.
Welcome back to Voice of Geauga with Skip Claypool and myself, Jonathan Broadbent. We broadcast this show on WINT Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. Feel free to join us on social media or call in 440-946-9468 like Bill from South Russell Village has done. Bill, you're on air with Voice of Geauga. What do you have to say this morning? Bill, are you there?
This is Noel Howard again speaking. Tomorrow morning at the commissioners meeting, we are going to be discussing NOACA, the funding story for Geauga County. It should be a very interesting time for everybody to come and listen.
So is that on the agenda, Dick?
It will be tomorrow.
Really? And how did you know about this?
Because I'm bringing it up.
Oh, I see.
Okay.
Right.
Well, we know that it's going to be discussed then because you'll be bringing it up.
It will be discussed in the beginning and at the end, and the newspapers will be asked questions too.
So
Because
the
both
a couple.
have articles supporting the nonsense that's in this document that supposedly was handed out in on March 13th.
There's so many falsehoods in that document, Dick, and I pointed them out in the last commissioner meeting. They use a 24-year period, 24 years. That's a long time, to talk about how much money we got back from NOACA, and so, but a majority of that was in the time prior to Grace Galucci. But the comment is made that we pay $35,000 a year on dues. It's a true statement. I'm not sure that the exact amount. I thought it was more than that now, 45,000, I think, and we get back 700,000. Well, both we pay actually $10 million. They use the figure 8 million, so let's use their figure, $8 million in federal gas tax, and we get back less than $1 million every year, and we actually get zero back from time to time. So we might have gotten 700,000 back last year. I'd have to look at the schedule, but the amount of money we're getting back out of the federal gas tax that we pay into the system is ridiculous, and yet, you know, there's a complete distortion by NOACA and by one of our commissioners over all the costs and the benefits. Our benefits from NOACA aren't worth the price that we have to pay, and we'd be far better off.
This is going to be an ongoing problem that they're going to have to face for at least every meeting that I'm going to for the remaining part of 2026. By the way, the League of Women Voters wrote me up on Facebook or one of these things saying that I was a bad person, and they actually had to go to Flays about me because supposedly the Sheriff's Department wouldn't do anything about the sign problem for the Board of Elections.
Oh, are they dinging you because you put political signs on the front of your car?
Yes, and then I harassed the Board of Elections people. And then the sheriff supposedly said that he's a veteran, so leave him alone. So they supposedly, hearsay, went to Prosecutor Flays, sort of to get me written up. So if I'm in jail tomorrow or some other day in the future, this will be the reason why. But I'm going to be there tomorrow, and it should be an interesting morning because I've made copies of the NOACA funding study for everybody, and it's going to be brought up because supposedly Dvorak and Grakey were at the meeting on 3/13 with Grace, and they say they've never been in touch with her. So they're going to be asked a lot of questions tomorrow.
If you're a trustee and you're listening to this program, invite me on to talk about NOACA, please. Because I would love to have a debate with Grace Galucci or our two commissioners, Breaky and Dvorak.
Well, they won't come on. They won't say anything.
No, and unfortunately, they like to spout a lot of propaganda which can't be that will not survive the light of day. But that's it. Nobody's going to invite me on because people don't want to really hear the facts. But that's it. Everybody knows how I feel about NOACA, and it's not
Skip,
rocket
you and
science.
Jonathan are doing a wonderful job, and
Thanks, Dick.
it's going to be up to more of the people and the citizens of Geauga County to stop this nonsense.
Well, that
by
comes.
the way, not this Tuesday, but next Tuesday, I'll probably wear the Oleg shirt to the meeting,
Good.
and we'll see if that gets anybody's attention.
Well,
my
The
understanding,
red Oleg shirt without the nonsense on it. I was wearing it the day that we went to the community county fair, and I still have my shirt that I probably will wear not tomorrow, but on the following Tuesday, the 28th.
just for the record and for our
put me in jail.
Well, I hope that they don't put you in jail, first and foremost, but just for our listening audience, one thing to know, and this is just a word of caution, you may want to look into the laws, rules, and regulations around voting locations that are active voting locations. There is the Board of Elections in the same building, and I know from having driven in there a few times recently, there's 100-foot boundary inside of which you cannot have political marketing material. They may include a T-shirt in that. So, Dick, I think that's where they might try to get you. So just exercise some caution, have some awareness, not only you, but our listening audience. Generally speaking, I do like the idea, wear T-shirts in that advocate for the things that you care about, to organize community, that express your frustration with an issue, do those kinds of things. It's up to us to get in there, get active on all kinds of local boards, and that includes commissioners' meetings. And kudos to you, Dick, for continuing to go in there and fight that fight. Same thing with Skip. He's in there regularly.
I do think we have this thing called the First Amendment, freedom of speech, so on and so forth. But by the way, before we leave the program, I did want to make this public service announcement, so to speak. The Republicans need poll workers in Geauga County. So if you have any interest in helping out with the election, being engaged, being a poll worker, get a hold of the Board of Election in Geauga County, both on the Republican and Democrat side. But it doesn't appear the Democrats need poll workers. They've got a lot of passionate people apparently. But it looks like we need Republican poll workers, and on election day you get to hang out, eat some donuts, drink some coffee, and help people to go through the election process. I've done it many times.
Skip, do you have that phone number?
So yes, it's 440-279-2030 for the Board of Election. And so, it's interesting that, and we're going to be coming up on the end of the program here shortly, but Dick parked. I was there last Tuesday. He parked in the only handicapped parking spot. Unfortunately, he's a very active citizen, and he puts political signs on his front windshield. So he was not allowed to park in the handicap, and he's truly a handicapped veteran. Not allowed to park in a handicapped spot and display political signs because it's inside of this.
Because it's inside the 100-foot boundary.
It's such a silly rule.
We're going to have a little bit of an awkward close to today's show. I'm receiving a notice that we are down to 30 seconds. A timer, unfortunately, doesn't appear to be working. So I'm going to close us out with the comment, remember to find us on social media and share. And don't forget to keep an eye on that mailbox. You should see the next Voice of Geauga newspaper coming out shortly. In the meantime, thanks for tuning in today. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 7.